Good morning, Matthew. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Good. I'm probably better than you at the opposite end of the day.
Yeah, and the opposite end of the temperature spectrum as well, I imagine. It's
Yeah,
about -1 here in London.
just opposites, full stop. But here we are.
Yeah. So I'd originally hoped to chat a bit to you about sort of Australia's squad to tour South Africa and how they might get on there. But now that tour has been cancelled, and all of a sudden they've kind of got one or two matches really between now and the Ashes, maybe a World Test Championship final and maybe a one-off game against Afghanistan. It feels weird kind of talking about it from an English perspective, given how much Test cricket we've got between now and then. But how do you think Australia are placed heading into that series?
Yeah, not too bad. Look, I think they'll look at this last series against India and go, there's a lot of things that are wrong. That's a public's view, I think, more than anything, because I think internally, I think they're very sound. When you look at their fast bowling attack, it's premium. Look at the options they've got with the ball off-pace bowling. They've still got plenty of options in Green and, of course, Lyon as well. And even someone like Mitchell Swepson who didn't feature in the play. So a leg spinner also could come into consideration, 1 year down the track, or less than that now for the Ashes. So definitely got bowling covered. One of the things that they will be concerned about is their top three, how they're all placed, what sort of combinations and permutations, will go into forming really the backbone of the batting lineup. The middle order, I think, is pretty well sorted. There's some conjecture around, who can bat six. But the reality of it is it's pretty solid. They've got no leadership issues, I don't feel. Payne will continue on to the Ashes. A lot tends to change in the cycle of Test match cricket around the Ashes for us. There's all sorts of, it's a bit like World Cups and the one-day squads. There tends to be a real build-up for that. And so I feel that conversation around Tim Payne's leadership is now a moot point. I think they'll back him for the Ashes. And that'll set the rest of the batting order up in place as well. Their biggest issues really are just going to be how hungry they are, how they can. Australia hates to lose. In particular, it hates to lose against England, but it's equally is shamed against India as well, given the track record that India has in Australia. In fact, the track record really of India touring full stop historically has been, one that's been checkered in the past. So, there'll be lots of concerns over that loss, but already, in talking to Justin, they're really looking forward to just moving forward, yielding to the mistakes that they made that could have been turned around, some missed opportunities with the bat, ball and also in the field. So, in and around those three disciplines, there was various things that you could pinpoint that had they have played 10, 15% better in those kind of critical moments, it'd be a very different conversation now than one they're having. I feel, though, the one that they shouldn't be having and probably won't be having is the conversation around their personnel, because I feel that they're pretty locked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that the top order there, and one player who I think England fans especially would have assumed he's like a lock to score like loads of runs against them would be David Warner, who's been so good for so long, but is going through sort of a bit of a lean patch at the moment. Do you kind of think that Australia will see that as something that will kind of just work itself out, or is that sort of a bit more of a worry, do you think?
Oh, look, it has to work itself out. I mean, if Australia is going to win the Ashes, it's got to have its top order that's firing. It's really as simple as that. Dave Warner, look, he went into this series, and I've been here many times before. I can remember going into the Ashes series in 2005-06 with a dog bite to my left Achilles, which I was just going for a run out in the country, and a random dog came and bit my Achilles pretty much in half. And then I had sort of 6 weeks in the lead up to the tournament where I was really struggling and certainly wasn't practicing. So it took me until the Boxing Day Test match to actually get anywhere near back in form. And my career was at a real crossroads then as well. That was after the 2005 Ashes series. So individually things happen to you. Like it's how you bounce from it. David, I think, will go down as one of our most revered opening players, batsmen, for sure. He'll be a part of that 100 club, I'm certain of it, as will Steve Smith, recently inducted into the 100 Test match caps is Lion as well. So, those sort of three kind of form the bedrock of the Australian lineup, and Davey will bounce, given that he'll have a bit more cricket under his belt, hopefully, even if it's just domestic cricket. The IPL being sort of swept away, I believe it'll proceed, through the April, May, June period, as opposed to where it was in November of last year. So, it was really an interrupted kind of preparation for the Test squad by their choice, but, such as the cricket program. So I just think he'll consolidate a little bit more, and he'll be a bit more ready in terms of being match or preparation fit for the longer format of the game. I mean, players always talk about how it's just part of switching between, all the formats. But it's not just as easy as that. There are actually challenges to each format, and the expectations and the outcomes that you deliver on those expectations, are almost polar opposite between where Davey started as a real short format personality and game plan to then evolving into this magnificent Test cricketer, with an unprecedented strike rate and also aggregate and average amount of runs. And sometimes your career tends to kind of mirror around what you like to go through. I think I found it much harder at the back end of my career trying to go back into a slot of Test match cricket where it was all about wearing opposition side down and being patient and, all of those kind of like non-sexy events of batsmanship became difficult when you've got this craving to hit boundaries and get on with play. And, it's a moving feast of your own thinking around your scoring rates and you're just a general sort of how the boundary makes you feel as a personality. So he'll have to address a few of those things and relearn and rewire, if you like, around the longer formats of the game. Now, should he wish to continue, into Test match cricket, it's a real challenge. Again, if I look at my own career, right at the back end of my Test career, where there was a really attractive soft landing with T20 cricket through the IPL and through the Big Bash League and other such tournaments. There's no question that there is a certain pressure with those formats of the game, but Test match cricket is exponentially harder. It's harder psychologically, it's harder spiritually, and it's harder mentally. And those sort of three combinations are punches to your own self sense of where your game wants to go. And you've either got to be in that zone or not. And that will be something that David will definitely have to consider.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you actually about the end of your Test career, because I was looking, so you got 2 tons in 2 innings, I think, against India at the start of 2008, and then within a year, I think you'd called it quits from Test cricket. Was that a case of, was it like a loss of form, or was it that kind of that extra 5% you need at the top of that like challenge to properly get yourself up for it? What was it, I guess, that led to that decision?
Yeah, look, I think the key factor to it was that it was really about, for mine, just trying to find that happiness in the game. The one thing that I valued my contribution in the game was how I was going to contribute to the culture of the team. Mm-hmm. That's a big, lofty kind of thinking, but it could be as simple executionally. It could be as simple as, was I enjoying having a beer and creating a meal for my mates, and was I loving training and turning up and doing all the hard sessions and most importantly, what was the game stimulating me, and was I finding it attractive? Because as I said, there's lots of reasons not to find it attractive. Test match cricket in particular, it's a ruthless, long, often unrewarding sport where the majority of the time you're out of play, not in it. Even when you're successful, you're mostly out of play. So all of those things were kind of like wearing me down. I did not like the way that our culture was going. It was very driven around this sort of sentiment of voices around high performance that were telling you what you could and couldn't do. I think very unprecedented, that voices, unfounded, a lot of those voices as well around your match play and your training and your workload. And it was like white noise. And most importantly, I think, to that is that it eroded this great sense of spirit of your mates and friendship in the games and your just ability to be able to live whilst playing cricket. It seemed like it was the other way around. It's like, oh no, you got to play cricket and it's your whole life. And oh, by the way, you can park other things. Well, in my view, cricket almost got in the way of a good tour. With respect to the game as well. Like when I came to England, I loved hanging out with Lammy and, people that I've met, along the way and along the journey of my non-professional days. I'd go up to Greenmount and hang out, with my old teammates in the club, say good day to Gary and Phil Neville, just live, like England is there to be sitting down and having a beautiful pint of whatever your bitter is available and enjoying both. You can have both. And so I felt like the balance between high performance was going like that, as opposed to just living and it being sort of somewhere in the middle where, yeah, you're fit. Yeah, you're mentally, really engaged in the sport, but also you're just having fun. I mean, you ask any of the sort of modern day cricketers if they've got a good story and they go, oh yeah, we had a great ice bath and that was cool. We had Diet Coke. I mean, to me, when you look at, one of our recent inductees into the Hall of Fame over here, Merv Hughes, I mean, no one will ever forget his colour and character. No one will ever, forget some of the great characters and flamboyant people of cricket that England's produced over the year, whether it be Geoffrey Boycott down to Beefy Botham or other, numerous, pretty much any of that era actually had great stories to tell, and they lived and played good cricket as well. And as I mentioned before, with Test cricket, it can't be all consuming. I really feel very sorry for these guys at the moment living inside of not just a bubble, it's like a triple bubble. There's the absolute bubble of the nucleus of the team, and there's a broader team, and there's the broadcast team that brings all the beautiful pictures, and they're all kind of got their various protocols, and it's kind of just not fun.
Yeah. Is that something that you feel, I'm aware that I'm part of the media as I'm saying this, but that the media kind of contribute to?
Me too. I'm a part of that as well. I get it.
But from the point of view of like, if say, Mitchell Starc and Pat Cummins went out and had like 10 pints tomorrow night and were like laid out on a pavement somewhere, that would be sort of back pages of the newspaper. Or even when you're on the field and you've got these stunt mics turned up, is that something that you think stops players from enjoying the game in the same way that you were able to, do you think?
Yeah, look, I guess I was really privileged, Ben, to play across three pretty unique and distinctive eras: the non-professional, professional, or semi-professional, fully professional. And also in that sort of, to qualify that, in that fully professional time, it still had a lot of the old ways of the semi-professional. I think that was the most enjoyable era. An era that for mine focused on cricket, but also focused on a lot of the cultural elements of the game, which incorporated the spirit of the cricket a lot more as well. A document that seems to get sort of pushed aside, rarely actually addressed, but the rules of the game seem to be taking a lot more significance, especially in and around DRS. Again, it's sort of, it's a really it's a really noisy conversation, because the more you sort of look at it, it's like a legal agreement. The more you look into it, the more grey there is. And the only people that win are lawyers. So my question to the game is always, well, who's winning out of creating a very sterile environment? Is it inspiring, our next generation of cricketers to want to be cricketers and choose that over other fantastic sports? Is our game, and has our game got an appeal to it that lends itself to the old ways of the game as well, and the traditions of the game, rather than just, the stereotypical kind of safe containment of character that we see. You ask a question of Joe Root or whoever, and it's just like I know that he's not trying to be dull or irritating at all. But he just knows that anything that he says that's a little bit about him will get eventually regurgitated and punched back at him. And I think that is sad, yeah, because I want to hear what Joe Root's got to say. I want to hear what's in here, not just what's in here and what's in the corporates that's running the game in the backdrops, who, by the way, have rarely played the game and certainly understand or have that sense of feeling around the spirit of the game. I'll give you a really good example of this. At the back end of the Test match in Brisbane, Ajinkya Rahane presented a signed shirt of the Indian camp to Nathan Lyon to recognise his 100th Test match. Now, I reckon that is an extraordinary moment of sporting history where that's what cricket's all about. Or, for example, Freddie Flintoff going down after, the win at Edgbaston, and the elation of that moment for England and what that would have meant, and taking time to consolidate Brett Lee will be something that's burnt into my brain around what's important in sport. Because the wins and the losses, they'll come and go, and the hundreds will be seeked and sought after, and they'll be had. But the game will still retain, or should retain, this great sense of purpose and fun, where you can live. And you can't live if you're just sitting in a bubble. And that's why I feel, at the moment, why it's necessary but really difficult for the players.
Yeah. And so just to finish in Australia, you mentioned Justin Langer earlier. And in terms of like the team culture and stuff, there's been kind of a few sort of murmurings in the press about how some players feel about him. I guess the first part of the question would be, how do you kind of from the outside see the current Australia team culture? And then how will Justin, obviously having opened with him for so long, how will he react to these? Will he just kind of brush them off and not really be bothered by them? Or will it be something that he realises sort of a bit of something that needs to take notice of?
Yeah, no, there's nothing ever gets brushed off in JL's head for a start. He will take all comments, deeply in hand and try and work out a way, as he's done through his whole career, to just get better at what he does. He would say that he is a young coach. He would also say, though, that I am true to who I am. That's something that JL's always been so solid about. He hasn't changed one bit since I met him in his very bad T-shirt and his shorts back in 91. He's just remained that person. And when I look, and now after I know him, as I do, I now look into his brothers and his sister and his dad and his mum that passed away a few years ago, but they are all just such solid individuals and people. And his own family as well, his wife Sue and his daughters, they're just all really nice people. So, for mine, he's got this great reservoir of just fantastic support base, along with mates that love him dearly. And culturally, he and Ricky Ponting are two individuals that love the baggy green more than anyone that's I've ever played with. So there's this really deep sense of respect and it's routed in the values and the purpose behind the baggy green club. Something that has changed and shifted away from the era that we've just come from, and the Lehman and Smith era of leadership, which unfortunately took Australian cricket into the depths of no respect. Or that's probably too hard, but certainly an era that's compromised its structures. Anecdotally, play the game hard, but always play it fair. Australians will, yes, world sledges, best sledges, no question. But the reality is the line was always there not to be crossed, and rarely was it crossed. And always after the end of the day, again, anecdotally, you could have a beer. And this is what these two, in my era, what the great England side of 2005 realised is that it could come into our dressing room and love the fact that it could celebrate a day's play. Something which was, for the majority of my career wasn't available to us. England versus Australia. And it was reignited in that era, like it was in the beefy era, and where they'd come in and they'd had days off, for goodness sake. They had a rest day.
Yeah.
They'd all play hard and celebrate, being involved in the test match, and then they come out and do battle on the 6th day of the test match. Or the 5th day, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I think that JL will take it very deep into that space, and will make sure that those sort of values and principles boxes are ticked off first as a primary source of how he covets the baggy green, and how the culture protects and nurtures, the next generation of cricketers. And then it'll also speak the truth, and players won't like to hear the truth. As no one likes to hear when you've made some mistakes. And it was very clear that mistakes were made. So he'll balance that out, though, JL. He's not a black and white individual. He's a very colourful individual that's got a great depth of understanding, coming from a deep sense of self-worth and purpose. And I just can't speak highly enough for his contribution already since turning it around 2 years ago from South Africa to this now delayed tour of South Africa and into the future of the Ashes.
Yeah, okay. So moving away from Australia to England and India, you had a very good record in Asia overall, especially in that 2001 series, which India won, which was dominated by Harbhajan Singh. So I guess the question is sort of a simple one. It's what's the key to playing a high-class off-spinner on a wicket which suits them?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's to have an attacking mindset. Something I think actually England and New Zealand have done pretty well in India. I think even better than Australia, more consistently. Just having options to be able to go. I acknowledge these are your conditions as a spinner, but they have to be under my watch. So I need 2 or 3 different options to be able to put the spinner back under pressure and therefore change his game plan. When I look at the way Joe Root goes about his cricket, in fact, when I look at most of the lineup of the England players, when they start to etch into the Indian and subcontinent space, they all have a very firm idea of how it is that they want to play. And I think that's key in the subcontinent. You all have different games. Like Gilly plays the game differently to what I did, and Ricky played the game, differently to what I did in the subcontinent. But I think just having a definite idea and then having to readjust around that as well. So if it's something not quite working, like I know my 2001 series there was much better than my latest series. I was much more focused on sort of the team aspect of batting in later series as opposed to my own game plan. But it yielded us being a better team, I reckon, because of how it is that I was able to support other players within the group gain their confidence on turning tracks. So that was the difference in my view anyway.
Yeah, okay. And then you mentioned Joe Root, and he's obviously had a brilliant sort of start to the year, and people talking about particularly how good he is against spin. When you look around the world, so not just England or Australia, but those teams as well, who do you see as the best players of spin going?
Yeah, look, I think I think India are very sure players of spin. Obviously, Virat Kohli is a master of the turning ball. Rishabh Pant, I think, has a really aggressive game against spin, which I'm sure we'll look at Rishabh's career and go 100 times over, why did you play that shot? but we'll also cheer loudly when he plays that innings that he did up in Brisbane just more recently, where he's able to just still somehow find a way to score quickly, but by the same token, take the control of the game as a seasoned campaigner like a Pujara as well. So excluding, though, I think the subcontinent teams, I think the best players have been probably still are Joe Root. The top three batters, really. Steve Smith, I think, also has a pretty good game against spin. A little bit sort of speculative. I like Stephen when the ball's turning a lot more than when it's just going straight. I think it just gives him more options and more angles to work with. I think Davey Warner also, has got a pretty solid game plan against spin as well. Although, we don't see it as much as the middle order players, do we?
Yeah, okay. And finally, let's talk about Hados 380, which is the Power Pack cricket game, launches in 80 days' time, I think. So tell me about that game, what people can expect and how they can find out more.
Yeah, look, we spoke a lot about innovation during this interview, and, for mine, cricket has stayed in a very safe space. So what better way to bring out some of that innovation in gameplay? One of the things that I love to do is when I was playing that season of the IPL was to launch that mongoose bat, something that messes with the sort of template of the game and sort of touches on that creativity. So you'll see lots of that sort of thing in the game. Match plays, verse offs, innovation in apparel, innovation in tone and in voice as well, and commentary. The game's got to have a lot of fun, mate. That's, if you've got anything out of this watching this interview, my personality is to have fun and live what you're doing. And this game will definitely be a part of that.
Yeah, I was looking at as you've had video games in their name, and I think it's you and Lara, Don Bradman and Graham Gooch. So it's a pretty good club to be in.
Yeah, I think Saps has also had a game as well, and look, I think last year I did voiceover for a game, and that's sort of where I kind of got the idea. For mine, the technology and innovation in technology is something that is always going to be a part, especially during COVID times. Like you look at the opportunities that we have to go outside and play have been limited. So, this will be, a way to live the game a little bit more, which is exactly, why you create these opportunities as well. But most importantly, I reckon it's just having that sense of adventure in the game, seeing things that are going to be a little bit different, exploring some of the ideas that I've had in my head for a long time around video games, but also just the innovation in the apparel and the voice as well. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, brilliant. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to playing it. Thanks very much for joining us, and thanks so much for your time.
No worries at all. Pleasure.